Lord, since we have gathered together again in your name as we should do, we believe it to be a testimony of our need for your presence in our lives. Being here together is one way of our saying that this short time of gathering has meaning and purpose. And without it, we recognize a void. It's our desire that you speak to our hearts through the meager offerings of human ingenuity, those things that we are able to offer. We will sing and praise, sharing the word as best we understand it, but we know it's you that brings the harvest to all that we're able to plant. In our hearts, we know we're where we should be, so again, we thank you for this wonderful privilege of worship. We pray for those that are going through various trials of all kinds and degrees, for those with physical and emotional challenges, for those who feel empty and hopeless, for those praying for direction, for those praying for answers. Help us to share the same goal this morning of giving to you the glory that is yours. And we ask in Christ's name, amen.
I love you, Lord, for your mercy never fails me, and all my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire, in the darkest night. You are close like no other. I've known you as the Father. I've known you as a friend. And I have lived in the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything, Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm living now, I'll give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God.
Thank you, Janice. Our text this morning comes from Matthew 14, beginning in verse 22. And while you are finding that, it's okay for us to gather together and smile, isn't it? I think it's a good thing. I mean, the Bible does say that laughter does good like a medicine. And we've learned that through our lives that sometimes we just have to laugh. We got to smile. If we don't, we'll cry or scream or something. So we got to have some laughter, some lightheartedness. And so I think church is a good place for it too, for the simple reason that we are together in here living a life, and each one of us has our particulars in that life, and it can be difficult. And the church is often a place where we go to try to make sense of it all. In fact, that's what we're hoping to do when we get together. We've got friends in here, and we mean something to one another. Whether we actually recognize that on a regular basis or not, we still realize at some point that we mean something to one another. And if we're not here, then we notice it. Like Vernon's not here, and we've already said why, but still we recognize it. And then Joey, and I can never remember Neil, thank you. Joey and Neil's not here. And of course, Joey's, I guess, still in New York. And these people that are usually here and are not mean something. And this is going to tie into the service or to the message this morning. In Matthew's Gospel, chapter 14, this is one of those miracles that we have to face again when we're studying the Gospels. And I have no problem with them, but some of the world does. And this is probably at the top of the stack, besides maybe the resurrection, as being one of those things where we scratch our heads. Last week we had the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, and those 5 loaves and 2 fishes gave us enough problem to think you feed that many people with, unless there were 2 whales. It's kind of hard to believe it's possible to do, but nothing's impossible with God. Nothing. And this text says that immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him on to the other side, and while he dismissed the crowd. Now, that was after the 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And after he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves, because the wind was against it. Now, the Sea of Galilee, I, of course, have never been there, but the studies, when we studied Holy Land geography, one of the things they told us about the Sea of Galilee was its location is down inside of a mountain range. And those winds would whip across that mountain range and come down on that water and turn it into a real challenge for those with rowboats or any other kind of boat. It could get stormy, about like the Pamlico. It could get stormy and you wouldn't even see it coming. It would just all of a sudden be life-threatening. And so they're buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. And shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified, and they said, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. And then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus reached out his hand and called him, and he says to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they'd climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." They had just seen 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and they still aren't getting it. Slowly but surely they're putting it together, but it takes them a while, like it does us sometimes. But anyway, Mark Twain tells of a visit that he made to Capernaum, and that's where this event takes place, this walking on the water takes place. So Mark Twain is visiting the Holy Land, and he's staying in Capernaum, and he writes in this novel, this book, and I'm trying to remember the name of it just for you. It's something about innocence. But anyway, it was a moonlit night, and he felt a little bit romantical. And so he decides he wants to go out with his wife on the Sea of Galilee. And so he found a man who was in a rowboat. And he asked him how much he would charge him to take him out on the Sea of Galilee, him and his wife, on this romantic little thing. And the man looked at Twain's white suit. You know, he always wore a white suit, or most of the pictures we see. And he's got a white suit on, and a white tie, and a white shirt. He's got white belt. I mean, he's whited up real good. And he looks at him, and he thinks that he's probably one of those rich, wealthy Texans. And so he said, "Well, let's see, I guess about $25. This is in 1886, I think. So he says, I guess it'll be about $25. And so Twain turns around, and as he's walking away, he's mumbling under his breath, now I know why Jesus walked. Well, I get it, don't you? Our text is a familiar story, and it's a strange one. A lot of these miracles are like that. They are strange. The miracles of Jesus, as we noted last week, pushes the envelope of believability for us. But those of us here in the 21st century aren't the first to wiggle in our seats at such a story. 125 years ago, some interpreters suggested that what really happened that particular day is that Jesus wasn't really walking on the water. There was a sandbar out there. Now, this is what they said. There was a sandbar out there that just happened to be where Jesus was at and just happened to turn and go to where that boat was at the time. And he wasn't really walking on the water. He was walking on a sandbar. Now, that story, that story's okay, all right? But it has one major flaw. And that is that if it has any credibility, then Simon Peter must have been a really short fella, because he almost drowned on that sandbar. So, I've got a visitor. Why did they think, do you suppose, that he was a ghost? Why didn't they say, why didn't they look out and say, ain't that Jesus walking on that sandbar again out there, and it's almost dark, Even the church jokes about this story. A congregation was calling its first female pastor, which two elders were dead opposed to. And that's, they just had a conflict. And one of them said, we got a woman that's how we can get to be our pastor. And the other ones, two elders said, wait a minute, whoa. Let's rethink this thing. But it wasn't necessarily because she was a woman. The reason they did not particularly want her to be their pastor was because every year they were used to going on a fishing trip with the pastor. And so they were talking between themselves and said, are we supposed to ask her to go on this fishing trip with us men? Well, they were kind of stuck in a situation, and since it was a tradition, they said, well, would you like to go on a fishing trip? And to their chagrin, she agreed. And so the story says that they motored out away from the shore for a ways, and when they got out there, they realized they didn't take the bait. And a lady pastor jumped up all of a sudden and said, well, just don't worry about it. I'll go get it. And she jumped out of the boat and just went walking on the water, crossed over to the shore to get the bait. And one of those elders looked at the other one and shook his head and said, I told you this won't work. I knew we should not have called that woman as our pastor, especially for a fishing trip, because she can't even swim. Well, I told you all those little ditties for a reason. It shows us how these stories bother us. We make jokes about them, and it's okay. It's lightheartedness, and we laugh about them. And we have these issues, with these stories. Like when you tell stories that are beyond our ability to believe, it takes faith to do it, and we have no way of proving it, and it goes beyond what our minds will be able to handle. So we normally wind up making a little bit of fun of them, or we're laughing about them a little bit, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just shows that it's beyond our point of believability. The point is that unbelievability is a normal response to what we are doing here, to what we're being told, and what we're supposed to believe. It's a struggle for most of us, and our normal response for us, because we are time and space bound people, is, I don't know about that. Even the disciples who had just witnessed the miracle of the 5 loaves and 2 fishes are stumbling. They see Jesus walking on the water. They had just witnessed this great miracle, and they see Jesus walking on the water, and they said, it's a ghost. You would think that they would say something like, well, things is going to be all right because Jesus is coming. Jesus is close by. It's a ghost. Mark even said that their hearts was hardened. It's a fact that many of the conclusions reached by so-called scholars, and this is important, many of the conclusions that's reached by scholars who can translate truckloads of dead languages, like Hebrew and Greek and Latin, and they can take these languages and translate them into English or whatever language they particularly speak. They have the ability, the gift of being able to do that, but many of them can't even check the oil in their car. What does that say? It says we don't know everything. We simply don't know everything. There's things out there that we can't explain. Things that we don't know what to do with. And when you hear stories like this, you might scratch your head, but in the back of your mind, there's this verse or this text that says, nothing is impossible with God. And so it means, well, does that mean that nothing? Yes, that means nothing. And so is it possible that Jesus could do this? The answer is yes. It is possible. Now, up to this point, we have similar stories in the gospel accounts of Matthew, Mark, and John, the 3. Luke doesn't have anything to say about this particular event, but Matthew, Mark, and John all agree up to this point. But then Matthew throws a twist into the story. As Charlie Daniels said in one of his songs, Jesus walked on the water, and I know that it's true. I know that it's true. My faith says it's true because I believe that there's nothing that is impossible with God. So, can he do it? Yes. Do I understand it? No. I don't understand it. I don't understand why he's able to take 5 loaves and 2 fishes and feed 5,000 plus people. I don't understand that. But as we just said, there are parts of this life that we learn on a regular basis that mine's far greater than my pea brain puts together and understands and comprehends. Yeah, I've told you many times about Ron Selleck. And one thing I could not understand one time, and I still don't understand, I shouldn't say one time, one thing I don't understand is how they know how far away something is out there. Oh, it's 248,000 light years away. How in the world do you know that? How is it possible to know that that's 240,000 light years away, which means that it took light 240,000 years to get here from a star that lit up 240,000 years ago? How is that? And he went into this long explanation. And I can't even use the words because I don't know how to pronounce them that he used to tell me how they did this. But there's some process that they're able to use according to him. And his IQ is about 168 or something. He's way up there. But yet he described it to me. I still don't understand it. But the point is, there's things that we don't know. And so is it possible? Yes. Is it understandable? Well, not to me. Those that believe the Bible, though, and believe that it's the Word of God, believe that Jesus is God, and that he is God in human flesh, and that nothing is impossible with God, so the whole thing doesn't consume much of our time. We don't sit around talking about how Jesus did it or why Jesus did it. We search for the message in the miracle. And that's what we're doing here this morning. We've spent quite a bit of time talking about the miracle, but what was Matthew trying to tell us in it? Why was Matthew, Mark, and John telling us this story, but Luke didn't see that it was necessary in his story? There's got to be a reason. There has to be a reason. There has to be some purpose why Matthew included it, why Mark included it, why John included it, and Luke didn't. They have something to tell us. They've got something that they want us to know. Well, in John's gospel, for example, as you get closer to the end, it said, these things and many more Jesus did. But I've selected these so that you might believe that he is the Son of God. So there's the purpose in it. Why did John select this particular miracle and other miracles that he mentioned? Well, he just wanted you to know that Jesus was the Son of God. Why did Matthew do it? He had a reason, I'm sure. They were in a difficult time of persecution. This book was not written until about 50 years after Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection. And so 50 years later, they're involved in a lot of persecution. The Christians are in trouble. Maybe that's why he wrote this. Maybe that's why he included this particular story in his writings, because he wanted them to be able to say, you know something? Even in the midst of all of this upturn, this turmoil, in the midst of all of that, Jesus comes to us. Just like he did those disciples on the water. Maybe that's why he chose this. Maybe he wanted to show us that Jesus really isn't that far away as we may think it is, in the midst of the toils and the difficulties that this life throws at us. But as we said, Matthew's account adds a twist. Peter gets into the act. Now, Peter yells across the water whenever they realize that it's the Lord. He said, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you. And so Jesus agrees, and Peter steps over the side. No doubt his compatriots that's in the boat is probably sitting there with their mouths wide open and not having any idea. They don't know whether to spit or whine or what. You know, they're just sitting there, and they're wondering what's going to happen next. And so Peter steps over the side. The waves are crashing against the side of the boat. The wind is white-capping the seas and the waves. And he begins to walk on the water toward Jesus. And suddenly our big fisherman realizes what he's just done. You know, it's one of those oops moments. He realizes, what have I done? And the scripture says he began to sink. And so he screams out, Lord, save me. And as we know, the Lord does exactly that. But while he is in the act of saving him, he says something to him. He says, you of little faith, why did you doubt? It's important to the story to consider that if the account had not been identified, if the person who is involved in this had not been identified, we would have all figured it out anyway. We would have known it was Peter, because Peter is always the one that's got foot and mouth disease. He's the impetuous one. He's always saying something that gets him in trouble. He's always doing something he leaps before he thinks. And that's just the way Peter was. And you find it over and over. So we would have figured it out anyway. But he occasionally made a fool out of himself, just like he does here. But there's one thing that you cannot deny about Peter. Yes, he makes a fool of himself. Yes, he has foot and mouth disease. Yes, he does things that he shouldn't do. He says things he shouldn't say. He gets himself in trouble. But you cannot deny the fact that he loved Jesus. You cannot deny that. He messed up, yes. But did that mean that he had denied and hated and that he had turned away? No. He was a human being just like you and I, and he was designed in certain ways to get himself in trouble. I know somebody else that's like that, and you're looking at him. I can get myself in world of trouble because I see like this one fella that's over there at the house. He's got a 50cc Chinese scooter. Now listen, you don't want one of them, okay? You just listen to what I'm telling you because I'm just trying to be your pastor. You don't want one of them. But he's got one. It's if one end ain't broke, the other one is. And he has problems, and he doesn't have any money. He lives in one of my cousin's little trailers over there, and he's just one of those people that needs help. And so I work on his scooter for him, and he considers that I'm his personal mechanic. That if he's got any problem, that's what he tells people. Oh, I got a personal mechanic. I got a mechanic that'll look after it for me. Now, wait a minute. You know where I got in trouble? I said one day, whenever I found out that it was broke, I told him I would fix it for him. I got in trouble. I still do it. But the point I'm making is it's very easy for us to get ourselves in situations. Peter got himself in situations. I got myself in a situation. I can't get out of it. And I guess even if I could, I probably wouldn't. Because he needs the help. There's many of us that interprets Peter's actions in Matthew's account, though, as incredible faith. I mean, you've heard that story. Peter was the only one that was willing to get out of the boat, and everyone else stayed in the boat. So he has incredible faith. Of all those in the boat, he was the only one with enough confidence in Jesus to think that simply at Jesus' say so, he could walk on the water. That's faith. But Jesus said, "O ye of little faith." Now we've got a problem. So we have just said that if him getting out of the boat is great faith, then why is Jesus looking at him saying, "O ye of little faith"? So which is it? Is it little faith or incredible faith? There are two schools of thought on this story, either of which offers wonderful and comforting help for us. But I'm going to let you decide which way it is for you. But I want to throw those two out and let you think about it. One is that Peter exercised great faith in getting out of the boat, but he should have kept his eyes on Jesus. If he'd have just kept his eyes on Jesus and not looked at those waves, he probably would have sunk. I preached a sermon on exactly that before. But on the other side of that coin, Peter should have stayed in the boat to begin with. Now, that's one way we don't often think about this story. He should have stayed in the boat in the first place. Like the rest of the disciples, he should have trusted the safety of the boat. That's where Jesus had put him to begin with. He told them, get in the boat, go on over to the campsite, and I'll meet you there later. Get in the boat. So if Peter was a man of incredible faith, how was he demonstrating little faith? He demonstrated little faith because he got out of the safety of that boat. He didn't trust the boat. Mike Yaconelli, who is once edited the theological satire magazine called The Wittenberg Door, he told a story one time which is kind of humorous, but it illustrates our point. That one of the most interesting things about kids' sporting events is the parents' reaction to their children. Recently, I attended my daughter's track meet. On the fourth and final lap of the boys' mile run, everyone was clumped together, coming for the finish line, except for the two front runners, who was a little ahead of the pack, and one other fellow who was a quarter of a lap behind everyone else. All of a sudden, he says, this woman jumped up and brushed past him, and I automatically assumed that it was the little boy's mother. And she was yelling at him, saying, Johnny, run faster, run faster. Well, he says, this young boy was rather portly. And he really didn't need to be walking a mile, much less trying to run a mile. And his face was glowing red. And he said, I wondered if perhaps he was about to die on the track. He looked bad. And here is Mom standing at the fence, yelling to the top of her lungs, Johnny, run faster, run faster. And Mr. Yaconelli says, I will never forget the look of hopelessness on Johnny's face. He had to be thinking, run faster? Are you kidding me? What am I, an idiot? What do you think the problem is here? I forgot to run faster? I'm running as fast as I can. And then he asked the question which strikes home, have you ever felt like Johnny? Here you are at worship on Sunday morning. You've just come in from a week that has been absolutely unbelievable. He has beat you up. You've either been sick or you've got some other issue that's going on, and you have been beat to death. And you sit down in the pew and you gasp for get a little breath, and you exhale. You're finally in a place of peace and quiet and still, and the pastor gets into the pulpit and he opens up his Bible, and his whole sermon says, run faster, run faster. Don't stop, keep going. The point is this. There's safety in the boat, and we're going to let that boat be the church. There's safety in the church. Here you are Sunday morning, you need something special. Quiet, a smile, a bit of laughter, a particular song, maybe even a sermon. Who knows? That's what you're here for. You're in the boat. And it's in the boat that we hear, take heart. It is I. Don't be afraid. If you're wondering if the boat was where Peter needed to be, then let me ask you, where did Jesus put him when he lifted him out of the water? Did he take him by the arm and say, come on, Peter, let me show you how to do this? And they took off walking across the water. No. He put him in the boat, put him back in the boat where the safety was. Will Willimon, who you know is one of my favorite writers and preachers, tells a wonderful little story about an event, that true event happened to him when he was at Duke as the chaplain there. And he said that he went to a lawyer's office, a lawyer in his congregation, and it was just a drop-in. He said, I didn't know the man that well. I actually knew his wife better. She was more the churchgoer than he was. But he did come on a regular basis. He just didn't get involved. But he said, I stopped by to see him one day. And he said, I walked in and announced myself to his receptionist. She told him, said it was the end of the day, and I entered the outer office. Everyone had left except the receptionist, and all was dark except for a light that was coming from the inner office. And he called out to me, and he invited me to come back to his office. So I didn't expect to see you here, preacher. Come on in. I was about to fix myself a drink. Can I interest you in one? And Willimon said, sure, just make sure it's caffeine-free and diet. He poured out the drinks, offered a seat, reared back in his chair, feet up on a very disordered desk before him. And Willimon says, what kind of day you had? And the lawyer said, it's a typical day, sounding almost tired, pure misery. Oh, I'm sorry, what was miserable about it? Williman asked. And the lawyer said, my day began with my assisting a couple evicting their aging father from his house so that they could take everything he has while he's in the nursing home. All legal. Not particularly moral, he says, but legal. Then by lunchtime, I was helping a client evade his workers' insurance payments. It's legal. Not particularly moral, but it's legal. This afternoon, I've been enabling a woman to ruin her husband's life forever with the sweetest divorce you ever saw. That's been my day. And Williman says, well, what could I say? Which, the lawyer continued, helps explain why I'm at your church on Sunday morning. I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed, Williman said. What can I say in a sermon that possibly helps the situations that you deal with during the week? And he says, well, preacher, it's not your sermons that I'm talking about. He said, it's the music. I go a whole week sometimes with nothing beautiful, nothing good until Sunday. Sometimes when that choir sings, it is for me the difference between life and death. Now that brings us to a question, me and you. Why are we here? What good is this for us? Why are you here? Why do you bother to get up and come? The fact is, what is important is that you are here. It does make a difference. And I'm not twisting your arm saying if you miss a Sunday, we're going to take your name off the roll. I ain't taking nobody's name nowhere. My point is that when you're not here, and I'm talking about solely like we are a little group, yes, but when you're not here, it's different. It makes a difference. We have our part to add, if it's nothing more than our pretty faces. We have a part to add. We come in and we're glad when we see each other. We know then that, well, maybe we're just barely alive, but we're here. And that's the point. To hear someone speak, certain people that comes in. My little girlfriend's not here this morning. And as soon as the Andrews got out and started this way, I said, where's my girlfriend? They're important, but they're not as important as that girlfriend. She's a sweetheart. It means something to see these people coming. It means something when we're here. When I was at John Wesley College, our biology professor used to read to us like we were kindergartners. I mean, we're sitting in there and he gets his book out and he read for one whole semester. He read one book. He had it all figured out how he could read a chapter or whatever it takes or 2 paragraphs or whatever to it last the whole time. And it was called, We Really Do Need Each Other. And I sat there so bored sometime and I would think, what in the world? I mean, I am 30-some years old. And you're reading to me like I'm 2. But you know what? He planted a seed. Because as time went on, and he knew it was going to happen, as time went on and something magical happened, I realized we really do need each other. We really do need each other. And that's why we do this.